They say there is nothing at all below this ground, but the instruments were quietly telling a very different story altogether. Two researchers, one crack in a wall and 100 meters of cave beneath in 2008, Andrew Collins and Nigel Skinner Simpson published a peer-reviewed paper about a cave system directly beneath the Giza Plateau. Here. The Egyptian Supreme Council did not challenge any of the data and instead simply erased the event entirely, treating the research as if it had. The research never happened, they said, and the permission never existed, and the caves were simply not there. 3 official denials and 0 counter-evidence. But the paper is still available online today, and the GPS coordinates are still published, and the photographs are there for anyone who wants to. The Giza Plateau is the most studied archaeological site on Earth and represents 2 centuries of excavation and measurement. By the very best researchers, and yet radar surveys in the 1990s identified cavities, chambers, and passages that match absolutely no known structure anywhere beneath the plateau at all. Every single team that tried to investigate those anomalies further had their entire site access revoked, every one of them, without any published explanation from why would research suddenly stop and who exactly gets to decide what is actually worth exploring beneath the most famous archaeological site on this entire. This is where things stop making sense, because the denial pattern here is not random at all. It is consistent and targeted, and it has, at the center of that entire pattern, stands one man, Dr. Zahi Hawass, head of the Supreme Council, from 2002 through 2000. Under Hawass, research licenses could be canceled within 24 hours of an inconvenient discovery, with no appeal and no explanation, just a permanently revoked. In 1991, geologist Dr. Thomas Dobecki ran ground-penetrating radar around the base of the Sphinx while looking for ordinary geological formations, and what appeared on his monitor was a rectangular cavity approximately 9 meters. Below the surface, directly in front of the Sphinx paws, rectangular, not random. In 1996, a team from Waseda University found a cavity beneath the second pyramid in passage-like formations running through the surrounding bedrock. Their instruments were recording what looked like corridors, not solid rock, and then they were told to pack up and remove from the country. With this story goes all the way back to 1977, when a Stanford Research Institute expedition ran seismic surveys around the Sphinx and hit cavities beneath the Sphinx's left paw. And in the surrounding bedrock, something was absorbing the seismic signal, something hollow in a place where solid rock. 3 independent teams, 3 sets of anomaly findings, 3 access revocations, Stanford in 77, Dobecki in 91, Waseda in 96, the pattern. Dr. Sakaji Yoshimura, who led the Waseda team, stated publicly that the anomalies represent undiscovered chambers, and he has never been permitted to return to. Collins' photographs show real limestone passages with multiple chambers and a large central hall that extends well beyond the point where his documented exploration actually. Data is not the problem here, because the data sits in peer-reviewed journals, published and verified, and the problem, as every blocked researcher says, they did not find answers with 4 independent teams and 5 decades of surveys, and the official response to every single discovery has been removal. They lost their access instead, and none of those anomaly datasets has ever been officially countered with a published rebuttal or even a single ground. Penetrating radar works like an X-ray for the Earth. You send a pulse down into the ground and then you carefully read whatever. On Dobecki monitor in 1991 appeared a clean rectangle 9 meters below the surface. And that geometry is completely inconsistent with natural karst. A radar malfunction produces noise that is jagged and irregular and random, and it absolutely does not produce a clean rectangle 9 meters underground, because 4 independent surveys from 4 different institutions spread across 3 countries and 4 separate decades, and all of them found anomalies in the same area. Natural karst cavities follow water erosion, and they are irregular and organic in shape, much like crumpled paper. But the Dobecki anomaly looks nothing at. The Waseda data shows passage-like formations that connect different areas beneath the second pyramid, and geological drift simply does not work that way. Right now, millions of tourists are walking 9 meters above something that instruments from 3 separate countries have independently flagged, and no one has been. The most frustrating part for independent researchers is that none of the anomaly data has ever been officially challenged and not one rebuttal study exists. In 2011, the Egyptian revolution seemed to change everything because Hawass was finally removed from his post, and several long-blocked excavations were, including the radar surveys of areas Hawass had kept restricted for many years. But the results from all those new surveys have still not been. Every single attempt to confirm the data always ends the same way, and at some point you really have to ask whether this is incompetence. Access denied every single time. And those two simple words have effectively buried 5 full decades of peer-reviewed scientific inquiry beneath the world most. Here is what makes this considerably stranger, because the idea of hidden chambers beneath Giza does not start with modern radar. It starts with the Herodotus writing in the 5th century, before our era, described an underground structure at Giza that he personally called more impressive than the Great Pyramids. When you overlay ancient textual descriptions directly onto the modern radar anomaly maps, the location matches are clearly not random and represent either coincidence or theory one is natural. Geology, because the plateau sits on Eocene limestone, and over millions of years, water erosion carves irregular natural voids that are. Theory 2 is intentional construction, because the Serapeum at Saqqara, 30 kilometers from Giza, is a vast underground burial complex that was completely unknown until the geometry of the Debeki anomaly, which is a clean rectangle 9 meters down, is far more consistent with deliberate construction than it is with using Collins published. GPS data researchers have virtually reconstructed the explored cave section, and the passage clearly continues well into darkness beyond where his exploration. Here is the detail that nobody quite knows what to do with, because in the 1930s, a psychic named Edgar Cayce described a hall. The rectangular anomaly that Dobecki detected in 1991 sits directly beneath the Sphinx left paw, which is the exact location that Cayce described. Both of these theories could be permanently settled with just one single excavation permit, and that is genuinely all it would take to answer what happens when science cannot complete its own test. Think of a doctor who sees something unusual on a scan and then gets told this is a map of everything that has been surveyed beneath the plateau, and the white areas have never once been scanned, covering more than all conducted surveys together cover less than 30% of the entire subsurface. And after 2 centuries of studying the surface, most of the ground penetrating radar also has hard physical limits, because below 10 to 15 meters, the resolution drops sharply and deeper structures may exist while remaining under Egyptian antiquities law. All discoveries made at Giza require Supreme Council approval before any publication, and the law applies retroactively, silencing findings even after the revolution removes Hawass in 2011. But the restricted zones all remain, and the new administration keeps the same locked gates. Because why does the prohibition stay perfectly constant when everything else around it changes? And that question currently has no published answer. And the silence has Dobecki findings were presented at a major geological conference and published as a formal technical report. And the Egyptian authorities then issued absolutely no official. Dr. Yoshimura stated publicly that the anomalies represent undiscovered chambers, and his full data set remains unpublished, and he has never once returned to Giza since. The 50-year pattern is anomaly detected access, restricted 4 independent teams. 5 full decades data accumulates year after year. Excavations consistently do not happen. The seismic data from 77 is not a theory, and the GPR from 91 is not a theory, and neither is the Wasita. We are building an incomplete map of what lies underground with enormous gaps still remaining, and the unscanned 70% may be precisely where the what if this is not protection of history but rather protection from it, because that single reframe completely changes how you read 50 years of something is beneath that left paw, and the instruments all agree, and 3 separate countries agree, and 5 full decades of independent data agree. Yet the mainstream archaeological position remains clear that the plateau is well understood, and known structures account for all detected signals with nothing significant left undiscovered. Dr. Robert Schock of Boston University is completely direct. There are cavities beneath the Sphinx the authorities know they exist, and not excavating these photographs simply cannot be unseen because they show physical entry and physical documentation of a cave system that officially per the Supreme Council does. Two competing interpretations using the same physical evidence and arriving at incompatible conclusions, which would be unremarkable. Except one side has site access, and the disagreement here is not between scientists and pseudoscientists, but is specifically between scientists who have site access and scientists who have been physically removed. Three research teams that published anomaly findings faced serious institutional pressure to retract their papers, and not a single one of those teams actually did. The question is not whether cavities exist beneath the Giza Plateau, because multiple independent surveys from multiple countries across multiple decades confirm that they definitely. The real question is what those cavities actually contain, and after 50 full years of detection, not one of them has ever been opened. And on the left, 5 decades of anomaly data from 4 independent teams across 3 different countries, and on the right, completely and entirely undisturbed ground, Collins' passage continues beyond his very last photograph, and the cave does not end where the documentation stops, and that central hall has been undisturbed. The most photographed site on Earth, the most controlled site on Earth, and the least excavated relative to what all the instruments suggest for now this remains entirely unresolved, and the data exists, and the caves exist, and the anomalies exist. So what do you think lies beneath? Subscribe to Beyond Explained for new mysteries every week, and leave your theory in